silent, you'll not find love. Only sleepless nights. I'm just a ghost of the man I was, too weary to fight.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us again. It's great to be back. We've had a couple of weeks where we have kind of been on hiatus, mini hiatus.
Yeah.
We had some personal stuff going on, and so this is first recording in a few weeks. It's good to be back with you guys.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, skipped it because my son and I were watching the school I teach at. We were playing in the state championship and ended up winning. So that was
pretty cool.
That was really cool. That was fun.
Yep.
That was really fun to be a part of that.
Yeah.
So, and then you weren't feeling very good there for a little bit.
No, man, I've been, and you guys might be able to hear it. My voice is a little spotty tonight. I've been battling something for the last few weeks. So,
Mike, how you doing?
No, I got to switch to me. Dang it. Okay.
I did that on purpose.
There I am. All right. I'm doing better now.
yeah,
Better now.
Yeah.
Better.
That's better.
you've had like just straight chaos for
3
month?
months. It's slowly ramped up. The last month has not been fun. But yeah, the last 3 months, this quarter has been a rough quarter.
Yeah.
It's crazy like how many little stressful things you don't think about as like a kid. And then when you become an adult, all of a sudden you're just like, man, how like...
Well, plus if you can't fix one, it's not like, okay, I get things added to my plate. And if I can't shove one off and
then
fix
it's
it
just
before, it's like,
piling
it's getting
up.
worse.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. Yeah, so that's what my last quarter's like. So it's starting to get better.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So
Well, I'm excited about tonight's conversation. It's kind of a question that's been bouncing around in my head for a while. I've been wanting to talk about this actually a lot. I've mentioned it to you guys a couple times, and like I want to, before I even give the question, I kind of want to give a little background on where this even came from. It came from two different things. First of all was reading some Aristotle and teaching other teachers about it, and just this idea of the function of human beings and like pursuing happiness, and is that the function of people and how they're made to work, and how virtue is a part of that. And just talk about this idea of like, virtue being function, right? It's functioning the way you're supposed to. So for instance, a virtuous pair of scissors would be a pair of scissors that cuts well. There's this really good video called Bite Size, or it's a group called Bite Size Philosophy. And they do one on Aristotle's virtue theory. And that's how they describe it, is like, it's something doing what it's supposed to be doing the right way. Right. And so I started thinking about like, well, what is the function of men? If men and women are different, like we say, right? What is our function? What are we made to do that's different? You don't use a pair of scissors for every single thing, right? There are different, there are different tools for different situations because they have different functions. They have different purpose. So in this case, the word function means purpose, a reason for existing. I think I actually went and got the Merriam-Webster definition, Mike, just for you.
Appreciate it.
Because then that way you didn't have to look it up. But the one I looked up for function, and there's a couple different, definitions, obviously, but the one we're using is, it's an official, oh no, wait a minute, where'd it go? Oh, the action for which a person or thing is specifically fitted or used, or for which a thing exists.
Okay.
It's its reason for existence, right? Its function. And so that I wanted to bring that up because there's another thing that came to mind when I was looking up, just sort of when we started this podcast, literally almost a year ago now. And I was looking up kind of like, what is the definition of masculinity? And a lot of definitions defined it as a social construct. Masculinity is nothing more than the expectations that society puts on men. And so I started just kind of arguing in my own head, well, what is masculinity? Is it function, purpose, reason for existence, design of men? Or is masculinity change all the time based upon the society you're in? And just the expectations that society puts for men. And so masculinity is only dependent upon what society decides it is at that point. That's kind of the question I want to start with. What are your initial feelings on that?
Oh, it's such a deep, it's such a multi-layered question, right?
Yeah.
Because it's at first you go, well, okay, yeah, guys are meant to do this, and then you're like, well, wait, like, but women do this, or like, oh, well, that's like the physical. Like my first thought is like, okay, where do we start? It's the easiest part is like physical. Okay, well, what's physically different, right? Like outside of what's immediately obvious, strength, like physical strength, aggression, risk taking. I would say, those are the first few things that just pop up, and then those lead into like, okay, well, what was men's role early on, in society, right? Warrior, hunter, I think farmer, some of these other things, and so like, okay, so like guys were biologically, designed, to fit certain things. But then it goes, okay, well, masculinity is not just physical, right? Like I think it's easy. That's the easy thing. So then it goes, okay, well, what is, in your question, what is different about men, and what does that speak to for their function? I think the first thing, and we've talked about it a little bit, is guys' ability to compartmentalize.
That's exactly the word I was thinking of.
That's the first thing, because I would say that that's just something that men naturally do. We don't even think about it. And it's like our default setting. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I guess those are just like some of my initial thoughts. Initially where I go to, is it function? Is it our design? Is it a social construct? Man, it seems to me it's a little bit of both.
Interesting.
Because I think what society does is they look at the man and they go, okay, I see physically how you are. I see socially how you interact. This is how you would benefit our society, right? Or this is how we think you should interact in our society. And so those are, I think, not as much currently, but I would say historically, those are probably linked to some of those either personality traits, so like men's personality traits, or their biological traits.
Mike, you have any thoughts?
Make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I get what you're saying.
Can either of you guys give me some examples that are societally driven?
I mean, so okay. You mean like other than things like warrior, like soldier?
I don't think warrior is societally driven.
Yeah, I mean,
I also don't think provider is societally driven. That's why I'm asking. Can you guys give me?
And that's actually
I'm just trying to think through this. I would like to know what is an example of something that's societally driven.
Maybe I'm thinking more of like gender roles, like in how, because I think how, yeah. Now I'm having to like.
I know. Now you're seeing why I wanted to ask this question.
Yeah, because so I think maybe it's more gender roles that are societally driven. Because, but then we say that that's masculine, right?
So it's a gender role that's societally driven.
Okay. So guys drive trucks, right? Like that's a stereotype.
Hold on, can I follow that one for 2 seconds?
Go ahead.
Why do guys drive trucks?
Because they're big and they can haul stuff. Because
they can haul stuff. Why do guys need to haul stuff?
Because they are blue collar workers. Because they're ranchers. Because there's a function to that.
But I would love to have a truck so I can move stuff. Like
me too.
To actually, I'm going to be building a shed.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to borrow my father-in-law's truck.
So and
by borrow, I mean he's going to
just following that one. Like, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent.
You're good. No.
So if we follow the stereotype of like guys drive big trucks to compensate for something or whatever, but guys drive trucks.
Trucks.
Why do guys drive trucks? So we can do stuff.
Sure.
Guys are more action oriented. Guys are supposed to be more action oriented. We're supposed to build things. We're supposed to prepare for things. We're supposed to provide. Trucks are a useful tool for those things.
I would say that's societally driven. That's an American thing. That is not
the trucks or the provision, because the truck is just a tool for the provision, right?
The trucks. Japan is very different, right?
So
you're not going to see that over there.
Well, they have trucks. They're all just smaller.
Well, yeah.
So what I'm saying is like, if we're taking the idea of like guys drive big trucks is a cultural thing, I'm like, well, that's a cultural thing because Americans have big trucks. I can't say that about Japan because Japan has trucks that haul things. They're just tiny. They really are. You can look at them side by side.
I don't know that there's a link to mass. And this is I'm speaking off the cuff here. I don't know.
I don't either. I'm just thinking through.
Like, I don't know that there's a link. I think here in America, we tend to go guys who drive trucks. Guys, I think if you ask people just on the street who's more likely to drive a truck? You'd say a guy. I would think.
I would think redneck would be what I would heard.
Well, maybe, but even still, like, you say redneck. Who do you think?
But
who do you picture as a redneck?
You think of the
You
guy
think of a
with
dude.
the stars and bars, like
Sure, yeah,
tank top,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. But
It comes to
my
mind.
point is, like, that is societally driven, because the expression of masculinity, right, in America looks different than the expression of masculinity in Japan or in Mexico.
so
Okay,
here's the thing,
I'll
though.
follow that one, but
Go ahead.
I'll follow. I get where you're going.
Yeah.
I think I get hung up on the caveat of like, okay, it's because our culture has a tool that represents the same thing in other, like, everywhere else. So, like, if the man is the provider, which is
Okay.
the role,
Sure.
right? There are different tools in different societies. Like, if you go to, like, if you look at Africa, however many years ago, whatever, I don't know these things, but, like, they have a spear, and I'm not trying to be racist or anything saying they're a spear, but I'm like, tribes hunt with spears and bows and arrows, crap. So that would be a tool that's a masculine tool.
Sure.
Nowadays, in America, we do a lot of farming, we do a lot of agricultural stuff, we do a lot of like welding and things like that, where big trucks are just the tool of the trade.
Yep.
So, yeah, the tool of the culture might change because the time, the technology, all these things, but the function of the man stays the same, and what that tool is representing is actually staying the same. It is a tool that provides.
What I hear you saying is the why behind the symbol is the same.
Yeah.
The symbol changes.
Yeah. And because over time, like tools of I'm not even on camera. Crap. I don't know how to do this anymore. Over time, like tools of agriculture change, right? We had spades and shovels. Now we have giant freaking tractors.
True.
She thinks my tractor is sexy. I'm pretty sure she thought my spade was sexy back in the day. It was probably a hit. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of like, where are we? I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
I'm more like trying to find out, okay, what part of where are we going with the conversation, and like, what are we going to focus on? Like, I would agree that the symbols are culturally dictated, but because culture changes through time, and therefore technology and the things that a way a man will still provide, for example, throughout history and through different cultures is going to change. But I would say that the common thread remains the same. A man is still the main provider. A man is still the one that.
That's if I was to, if I was to say something like there's that component of utility, right?
Sorry.
Whereas perhaps as you're saying that, I think about so like you look back, things like coat of arms, right? What's commonly depicted on that stuff, right? A sword, it's a shield. It like there are certain things that were very masculine and they were tied to those roles, but it was because how they their utility in that society, right? But the men seek utility or function on utility. I don't know how to express that. My thought on that.
I like the fact that you guys went straight down the path I was aiming you for, to be honest.
Okay.
Because you remember a while ago we had a conversation about milestones and kind of like at one point does a boy become a man? And we had another conversation though. We looked at various cultures across history.
Yeah.
And we looked at their expectations for their men. And we noticed that they had so many commonalities, even things like honor and discipline. Across, again, warrior, whatever it was, there was some form of warrior and nobility and honor. There was always something about provision, building, crafting, something. Even when you looked at ancient Egypt and compared it to, like feudal Japan, you still saw similarities in the expectations for their men, and yet those cultures did not interact. And so I find that was really what brought that question in my head, was because I was like, I don't understand how we can have cultures across entire continents, different continents that have never interacted, and still all expect the same thing of their men. Why? If it were societally driven, would it not be very different from society to society? And yet we see significant commonalities. So to me, that would imply, like you were saying, that the function of men, that it's more towards the function side, not so much the societal, and that it's being reinforced by society because it's function and because that's healthy and because that helps men become who they're supposed to be. And I bring this up because we've talked about this before, how many young men and even middle-aged men seem so lost in our culture.
Sure.
There's very few men are going to college anymore, and the numbers are just going down. They're going to keep, and I guarantee there's many reasons for that. I mean, who the heck wants to go pay $1,000 to hear how bad you are? Right, which is the truth. I'm sorry.
I mean, the education system already is built for more how how women learn versus men. I mean, okay, we're going down a path like, I think there's a difference between like, does culture reflect it or society reflect it, or does it shape it? I think society has the ability to influence, but it does not change what it actually is.
Yes, it doesn't change the actual function.
It can influence whether or not strong men rise or weak men fall. It can influence whether or not there is a culture in place that is going to foster masculine traits and masculine behavior and reward that, or it's going to punish it, right? So that's where I think society comes in. And unfortunately, I do think a lot of people in society nowadays, they try to sell young men on like, no, this is what masculinity is because this over here is bad. And so they're trying to change it. But I'm like, that's what we all have been saying, though. You can't actually change what masculinity is. You can tell somebody to be less masculine and tell them that's bad, but that doesn't change the fact that this over here, this thing that you are driven to do naturally is the masculine thing, right?
So what do you guys think about then when you have, like and I hate to go back to stereotypes, but stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, right?
I love stereotypes.
You have the dad who comes home from work and he demands a beer, and what part of honor or what part of like why is that considered that was considered masculine back in the 50s, right? Like why though?
All right, can I play
go?
Just going on my
1,
head.
2, 3, go.
I'm not saying this is what I believe. Oh shoot, I'm on camera. God, I'm sorry, Tim. I'm not saying this is what I believe, but this is what I would think, right? If you're the breadwinner of the house, you come home, it is actually kind of like a sign of respect to let him go sit where he wants in his little chair, in his little throne, whatever it is, right? A place that's reserved for him. Give him time to relax and have a moment to himself because he spent all day working and toiling and doing whatever.
Sure.
And then the beer would just be like anything else, right? Like what is something that helps you relax or what is something you enjoy?
Sure.
So if you love and respect somebody when they get home, they've had a hard time. Would you not want them to be able to get into a position where they get to relax and unwind for a bit?
And I hear that. The other part, the problem though, is the other side of that coin is, well, so you're then the wife did nothing at home all day, taking care of the kids.
That's exactly what I was thinking
right?
too. Yeah.
Right. So like, because you're saying, well, the husband went out and worked hard and did all these things for the family.
Yeah.
And so he deserves to come home and relax.
Yes.
Whereas what the wife did.
Why does one preclude the other? It's not an exclusionary statement.
I'm not saying
the guy comes home, he deserves that. Yeah,
I think he's saying
there's not. Hold on, there's nothing in that statement, and that's I know it. I don't think it's confusing. I'm clarifying for anybody.
No, you're good.
There's nothing in that statement that would ever imply the exclusion of the wife doing any kind of hard labor or any hard work or any effort to contribute to the family, or even the kids for that matter.
Yeah,
it is simply a sign of that little ritual, for example.
Sure.
If that's the example we're going with, I'm like, it's a way to actually have a little bit of respect for the guy if he's doing a thing. There are ways where women can actually have that respect shown to them, and they should be able to relax and go do things.
Home?
I mean, there are different ways.
In the door,
people tend to
standing up when a woman enters the room,
and people tend to receive love differently than everyone else. So I think that became a stereotype because when it did, the time was predominantly men would leave the house to go do harder labor than what women were doing at home, if we're being honest.
Or we're
physically harder.
Physically harder. Like, okay, we're not going to mince words here. Yes, women's jobs and roles as the housekeeper and the raising of the children is not a task for the weak.
No,
I understand that. However, men going out and welding like beams together on high rises, or like fishing for crabs in the ocean in Alaska, whatever. These are unbelievably difficult tasks that, like, when he comes home, kick your feet up, give him a minute. So that stereotype came around in an era where that was the predominant type of balance in the family, which I would actually argue is very healthy.
Well, and it came across a time where women doing that work was not, I don't think it was respected as it should have. You know what I mean? I mean, would you guys agree with that?
I have a hard time with that.
And again, I'd have to, but as a
I think we get a narrative a lot in our culture saying women were not respected. I respect the heck out of my wife every time she does. Yes, but okay. So if I do now, I would have to make the assumption that looking through history, I would not stand alone as a unique data point in that. I would assume that there are other men like me who would go out and do things, and they come home and they're like, my wife is raising these 6 kids that I have created with her, and she's doing a fantastic job. She is stitching together clothes for us. She's making our budget go on where she can. She's cooking us full meals with nothing. And I'm like, I cannot believe that men didn't do that. I would argue that the idea that women don't get enough respect is a tool of feminism to try to create a weapon against men so they can be like, you're not respected enough. You need to go be a boss woman and go do this thing. And it breaks apart the nuclear family versus being like, you have the greatest power in the entire family right now. And I'm pretty sure men knew that because you can create life and you keep our life running. I make the money. Sure. And I can build the world around you, but without you doing the thing, it will fall apart. So the fact that I do not have the hubris to think I'm so unique and advanced. I would assume that others before me have been able to do that regardless of the time.
I mean, I guarantee you there were, but I think there are also people on the opposite end where, again, that sort of like that ritual became, you do this for me because I'm up here.
The
and you're down
expectation,
here.
and that's where I think I'm coming at it from is it's like it whether or not it started off as like a good thing or it was like a, it made sense. Like, I think what my biggest gripe, I think what I see is a lot of guys get in this position of like, oh, well, I'm the leader. So guess what? Like they embrace this like superiority, right? And that's not true leadership. And I think we've talked about that, but I think that's my issue. And so like that gets tied into the cultural view of masculinity. So like guys treat their women this way, right? Like that gets ingrained in some of that.
So
right?
here's an interesting question then. Is that a function of masculinity or is that a malfunction?
I don't think it's either. I don't think it has anything to do with masculinity. I think that would be an aspect of where I'm saying that society is going to do things that can influence how men will behave, but it is not masculinity. Men, you should go out and bang as many chicks as you can, and you should get ripped doing steroids, and you should drive a Lamborghini. Why? It's a chunk of metal that costs $200 million and it's going to get wrecked. Yeah. My function is still to go do these things. My function as a good leader, as we described, is to respect everybody underneath me and take care of them and sacrifice as much as I can to make sure that their needs are met. That's the leader. That's the dad. So
then if as guys we're truly masculine and functioning as men, as masculine men, then it shouldn't matter in theory what society says is manly or masculine.
I would argue that
function
even in your example, the men who do it as a stereotype do it because they do not feel whole. They feel a gap. They feel insufficient. They feel weak in some way. The men who receive that action as a sign of respect and love and are able to just rest in that almost in that moment, they are also probably really masculine men. They probably do take care of their wives really well. They look out for their family really well. They probably work really hard and diligently. They are probably real men. So like, I think it's a disservice to look at an act and then say that this has a bad light on it simply because some weak men took advantage of it. And I think that's not a good way to.
Well, I don't know that it was some weak men. I think it became a stereotype because it was fairly common.
I think it's common, but was it bad?
Well, but that was really what my question was like. Well, is it bad or is it not? Like, why did this come about, and how does that speak to masculinity? Does it speak to masculinity? From what it said, from what we're talking about here, it doesn't sound like it speaks like to masculinity. It sounds like it's a societal quirk that if we allow it to impact us and allow it to kind of guide us, like we're going to go down the wrong path. There's nothing wrong with people doing something for appreciation, right? Like we should be showing our spouses, our friends, like we should be showing them love, right? It should be reciprocal. We should never be in relationships where it's one-sided and you're always giving or you're always getting. You know what I mean? Like there should be times where there is a balance in that. And if there's an imbalance, I think that there is either an underlying problem or, well, you're just not a great person.
Yeah, I like that.
So I have another question then.
Okay.
On this idea of function of men.
Mm-hmm.
Does function change throughout our lives? For instance, the function of young men.
Specific function or general function?
No. I want to be. Let's start with specific, maybe.
Yes.
because what I'm thinking is, because I've gotten this question before, and I've heard this from someone we actually want to have on the show.
Sure.
What happens when you have a man who is suffering from a debilitating disease, but he's still trying to put in that effort and try to, what happens? Does he cease to be masculine, or can he still be masculine while battling that disease and not fully fulfilling that initial function of men?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it is the effort, right? Like it's you are going to give grace in instances where you realize, okay, you don't have the full capacity you normally would, right? You are not operating at, 100%. You're operating at 25%. And yet you still have the, I'll use your word, Matt, virtue, to continue pursuing these things, these good things that you know that you should be doing, right? They may not be coming out the way you want them to. They may not be coming across the way that you want them to. However, I think I hate, this is a little bit of a slippery slope, because I don't want it to be like, well, as long as you put the effort in, it doesn't really matter, right? Because there is plenty of that out there, and that's a load of garbage, right? I think effort does matter, or outcomes do matter. Effort matters, I think, more.
Yeah.
Which I know that might seem like I'm sort of straddling the fence on that.
No, I mean, it sounds like we're trying to flesh out we're trying to flesh out an idea and think through a thing. So I don't think you're straddling an idea. I think you're touching on points that we're trying to think through. I want to take that idea like one step further, right? So if we're looking for truth, the truth has to be true. Absolutely.
Consistent.
Right?
Yep.
Cool. So if I believe that we were put here on by a creator, and that
by a creator,
you know what I'm saying? If I believe in God, and I believe that God has made man, and that he has made man to serve a specific function, that mean all derivations of man would also be able to serve that function. Derivations, I mean men going through an illness, right? Sure. That's a temporary ailment. I would also say men who are getting weaker than others, right? Sure. Like my physical strength does not match up with Tim's. I know people whose intelligence match, like I will never be as intelligent as some other men. Like on scales, sure. I will never match. There's gradations. Also, you look at people who are born with disabilities or have received a permanent disability.
Yep.
Do I think that anybody in these other categories could be less masculine than others? If it's a truth, then no. Yeah. So then it would be weird for me to think that somebody who has a temporary ailment or even a permanent ailment or something of that nature would no longer be able to be masculine simply because one aspect of their life has been muted. Not muted is the wrong word. Eroded something. Yeah. Weakened, lessened, whatever you want to say. Right. And I think that's why we look at what is masculinity. And like when we talked earlier about it being a process, right? That's why when you're touching on both effort and outcomes, right? It's one reason I liked the idea of it being a process, because process only works if you actually include both. You apply a level of effort, you're pursuing this thing. Sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't. Recently, Tim, you've picked up a majority of the work for the podcast. You put in way more effort. Well, and Matt has. I've done nothing. Oh, but it's ebbed and flowed, right? There have been weeks where some people have been able to put in extra hours and burn the midnight oil and do things, and then they have to dial it back down. It comes and goes in different grades, but you are still striving towards that goal, right? So that's why I liked when you're touching on both outcome and effort. You're like, I'm not sure if you see that. I'm like, I think it's the combination of both. You will get an outcome if there's any level of effort. The idea of masculinity is we are pursuing that endlessly to whatever degree we can. If you have somebody who can't pursue certain other things, the fight through that illness, that sickness alone is a masculine
trait.
Like you were fighting for your life.
Sure.
Very much so right now. You are fighting for your position and creating value and whatever it is you are doing. Like these are battles. So
that's exactly what I was
went long-winded there. I'm talking a lot today. I'm not.
No, I appreciate it.
That was kind of the direction I wanted to go again, was this idea of the actual fight against that is such a masculine thing. Do you not go gently into that good night, right? Like the fight against,
great poem.
Or even like, elder, like men who are becoming older.
I'm on the wrong camera.
Who feel as though they are losing their usefulness because they can't do the same things they did when they were younger, And I bring that up because the only reason why that came in my head is because of what we're going to talk about in a later podcast. Another character from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And his name is Theoden, and a lot of things that he's going through is that coming to terms with being an elderly king, And I don't want to get into that now because that'll be a good discussion. But that again, that idea of, you know, just because you're not capable of that exact same thing that you were younger,
Sure.
right? Capacity, right? We talk about this idea of pursuit of strength. Strength really means what? Your capacity, right? So as long as you're still striving to reach that capacity, even though it's lower, I would still say that's absolutely masculine, especially when you're going against something that somebody else isn't even struggling with. Like, how many guys aren't struggling through things and then don't have the level of success that somebody who started off with like significantly less than they had, right? Like, to me, that's why we love those stories of the underdog or the small teams or the guy who came from nothing, right? We love those stories because that's masculine us. You fought. And again, that idea of fighting isn't always just physical, right? Like, or defending and protecting. You don't think defending and protecting is going to work every day and then coming home to your wife and being faithful to her, or coming home and making sure that you're raising your kids right, checking in on them with their homework, and like, that's defending. Right? Like I always think of like a tree that's really well nurtured and watered, that can fight off disease, that can fight off, you know, invasive species, things like that. But a tree that's withering is going to die. Right? And so when you come home to your family and you're serving them and you're pouring into them, that's masculinity, that's defense, right?
Well, I mean, and it has to, I mean, I know we talk a lot about families on this show because all three of us have one, right? But I think that has to go. I mean, that doesn't just include, like, you're not masculine only if you have a family, right? If you're coming home and doing these things, right? Like, you know, doing your job well, you know, pursuing knowledge or pursuing endeavors that make you better as a person, seeking to be a positive impact, a value add to those around you, building others up, finding people that you can pour your time and life into. I think that those are all other ways, right?
Absolutely.
That guys, you know, who aren't in the same situation that we are.
Well, and I think that's something I would love to keep trying to intentionally address during each episode, is kind of like, because again, we look at it from our own point of view. And so trying to take a step back to like when I was single, which is a very long time ago, and it wasn't for very long in my life, to be honest.
Sounds like a flex.
No, it was more just like, I didn't spend that much time. I tricked her into marrying me early. That's how you get them.
Right.
You get them before they get smart, start figuring out they can do better than you. But no, like I guess trying to put myself in the shoes and being like, as a single guy, what would I be doing? Like, what would be a way for me to, you know, pour into other people's lives or my community, whatever it is. And I could think of like a ton of different ways. Right. And I remember doing after school programs, like helping out with these little kids after school, or coaching. How many guys go out there and coach kids, whether it be whether it be actually as a head coach or assistant coach or just training and all that stuff. I see guys like that doing that stuff all the time at my school.
It doesn't even have to be sports. I mean, it could be somebody who is younger than you, who is just starting their career. It doesn't even have to be kids. It could be somebody who's younger in their career, just starting. You're 10 years down the road and you mentor them. Or you have a hobby that you love and you're good at, and you find people or you come across people and you show them, right? Like, there's that teaching component too.
Or being that person at work that steps up when things are needed. And takes on the hard things so other people don't have to. That's like, those are the people I admire a lot, right? And you don't need to be married to be doing those things in your community, in your church, in your friend group, whatever it is. And so for those of you that aren't married out there, there's some encouragement for you and just some ideas of, again, this pursuit of function when it comes to being a man and masculinity. I think it's interesting when we look at history, and I keep wondering to myself, like, I look at history and like, even what we talked about at the beginning, like, you know, there's been times where like in history where, you know, okay, whatever, where men were treating women poorly or whatever. I think that's, again, as we get further along, I feel like we understand masculinity more. And it's not so much that we're changing masculinity, but rather we're understanding it at a deeper level. That's more of like a science comment. Like, think of it this way. If truth is true, it never changes, right? For instance, when people believed the earth to be flat, that didn't mean it was flat. That belief was always false. Even though it was accepted as truth, it was not actually true, right? And so this idea of masculinity, you know, if there's, you know, there's guys out there who are pushing this idea of like, again, you know, taking advantage of women or sleeping around with women, or it's in the material wealth that you can build up. That's what makes you a man. To me, that's not masculinity, even though it's presented as it. And I love the fact that you touched on that, Mike, so much at the beginning, because that was going to be one of my other questions. It was kind of like, what are the almost like facades, the facade masculinities, right? Like, we didn't get talk. I remember last week, and I can't remember what we were talking. I think it was immaturity in men, and I didn't get to mention this, but I wanted to talk about, like, do you ever notice those guys who have to constantly remind you how manly they are?
Sure.
They have to or they have to tear down other men to make themselves feel a little better, right? You know what I mean? And it's like, to me, like, again, that's not masculinity. That's a facade.
Yeah.
Right. And masculinity is built, it's constructive, it's not destructive.
Yeah.
Right. And especially to other men. I feel like there's enough things in this world that tear men down and tear us away from that function. Right. And I think that's another thing I wanted to bring up. We've had questions about, like, well, what do you mean by tearing men down? That's what we mean. Pulling men away from their function, the way they're meant to work.
Yeah.
And that's what I think of when I think of tearing men down. And I think there is a lot of negativity towards men as well. I mean, literally it just came out today. Did you guys read that? Or it wasn't today, it was yesterday, the day before that. The lady, remember the Duke lacrosse team falsely accused? Well, the lady came out, finally said, oh yeah, I totally lied. You know, and it's like the assumption that, you know, the assumption of guilt on those young men, right? And, you know, that's what I think of when I think of tearing down men. But I often think of that idea of pulling us away from our function and how we're supposed to work. But that can come from both, you know, it can come from various sides.
Yeah.
Because you have those, again, the hyper manly side where they're like, you know, you're only a man if you're benching 500 pounds and drinking your steak out of a straw. You just blended it up with some eggs, right? You know what I mean? Like, too over the top. And so, yeah, or like you have to be physically fighting people to be a man. Like, all of that is pulling us away from our true function.
I feel like they are, because you said just a few minutes ago, you said, as we've gone through history, we get a better, like, understanding of masculinity. Is that kind of a good way to put it?
I think we also lose.
And that was going to be,
well. I was going to say, I knew you were going to bring that up.
That was going to be my comment, is like,
I think we forget things.
I think our perspective changes on what masculinity is, right? And that's why, like, masculinity is a constant. It just, the way it is expressed in culture, it changes.
Or, like he said, the tools.
Yeah, the tools, right?
I think is really interesting. That was a really interesting way of putting it, Mike.
Sorry.
Why do you apologize? Like, that's a
I
good.
talk
I
more
just
than I should've.
complimented you. I'm really sorry. I made a good
welcome
comment.
to my house, dude. That's how it works.
No, it's, I don't know. I'm gonna be wrestling with this for a little bit, because I think Xavier, my son, literally asked me today, like, what is masculinity? And I was like,
We have arrived.
oh
Yes.
my gosh. All right, dude. Like, we need time.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was a little bit tongue tied, because I was like, well, like, that, it's such a loaded question. What is masculinity? Right.
Yeah.
And I think society tries, like you said, to say, well, this is what masculinity is, right? They put a lens on masculinity, which makes sense in that time and culture. But the truth of what men are, the truth of masculinity still continues, right? I think what we are searching for is the right lens to look at masculinity.
Yeah.
I think what we are looking for is the complete view. We want the NASA picture of the Earth as a globe, right? Like, that's what we want of masculinity, because I think if you go to social media, you have all kinds of flavors, right? Like, if you guys have talked about, you have everything from, you know, hyper masculine to the effeminate men to, you know, everything in between. And they're all saying, well, this is what real men do, right? And I think that there are times and places where some of those portrayals are masculine, right? There are times when guys need to be incredibly gracious and incredibly tender and incredibly kind, right?
I can tell you, I have daughters.
Yeah. And then there are times where guys need to be like monsters. Like, there are times where guys need to destroy people. And I'm not saying that to encourage violence, but I'm saying that, like, there are times where
that tool needs to be used.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
You look at soldiers, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Or police officers.
Police officers,
or
sure,
even,
sure.
I mean, so we do a lot of training at school about school shootings if they're going to happen. And one of the best piece of advice I ever heard was one of these former SWAT officers. He now runs all sorts of stuff here in Colorado. He runs, like, he's helping establish the common terminology for all of the law enforcement officers and schools. So when we say it, we all know what we mean.
Yeah.
And one of the best piece of advice is he said, train your lizard brain, right? So that subconscious part of you. So he said, sometimes when you're sitting in your classroom, think to yourself, if a guy came in right now with a gun, what would I do?
Yep.
You have to, and think through it, come up with some sort of plan. Like, I have these big heavy computers, ride my computers. The first thing I would do is just pick one of those up and just huck it as hard as I can.
Yeah.
It might not do much, but like, at least having this thought process of what would I do if I could get my hands on this guy. Right.
Sure.
Like, and I'll be honest with you, like, just saying that, like, just going through that in my mind, like, as a school teacher, I'll be fully honest with you. If a dude came in, tried to hurt some of my students, I don't care who it was.
Yeah.
If I got my hands on him, it'd be over. Like, there would be pieces of them left, and that's it.
Can I share with you guys a nightmare that I've had, like, persistently throughout my entire life?
Sure.
Is weird.
Do we need to get the like long couch out?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it ties into exactly what we're talking about here. So, and there probably needs to be some long couch time for me with this, but that's not this time. So one of the nightmares I've had is and this is probably, I'm not the only one, but this has been persistent since I was little, and even I don't have them often. You know, I can't even remember the last dream I've had, but I'm in a situation and I'm fighting and I'm punching. Every punch is so weak and does nothing. Right? That is like a big fear.
I'd be curious how many men have had that, because I've had that. Like, where you feel like you want to fight and you just you can't.
Yeah, you're like, I know I can do this. And it's never out of like I'm gonna go punch somebody and beat somebody.
No, but it's
up.
always in
your defense.
Yep, in defense.
I'm like defending myself or defending somebody else or doing something, and I'm like I can do this, and then I punch and it's just like the weakest, you know, like, and it's a fear, and I think it speaks to a little bit of like there is that part of us that understands like we need to be able to do something.
That's so weird that you brought, like, I can distinctly remember having dreams like that. That's really weird. I'm curious to see how many other guys. Mike's like, I have no idea.
No, actually, I'm kind of thinking more like the other way around of like, okay, so Matt brought up going through scenarios, and the guys, how many guys do you think run through situations and scenarios that are just like, we make up, if a robber breaks in or zombie apocalypse happens, like, I feel like that's a guy thing, right?
I can't think of another guy who hasn't. There was a meme like that where it's like like you see it's from the POV of a guy with a gun. He's got the cigarette. It's like you're smoking your last cigarette as your family gets away and you're going to sacrifice yourself.
Yeah,
and this lady posted was like, my brother said, like, this is what every masculine man, like,
it's like
every
an honorable
man dreams
death, man.
of this
It's
moment.
like you go out with the bang, serving purpose.
Like, and your family gets away
I would be
safe,
very
but you
curious
have to
to
sacrifice
know.
yourself. Like, that is. That I don't think there's a man out there that doesn't have that dream, right?
I feel like the honorable death thing is definitely a universal guy thing. First of all, like dying in battle is a thing. Like I love watching I call them kung fu movies. I'm sorry, they're from Thailand, China, Japan, Hong Kong, all over the place.
They probably feature kung fu.
Okay, never mind. No, some of them don't. Anyway, that was one of the cultural things that I had to get used to. Is like the hero doesn't live as a happy ending. The hero dies is the happy ending.
That's the happy ending.
Yeah. Which I can totally relate to, but that feels like a universal, not a cultural thing, which is ironic. But I am curious, like, if it is a natural thing in men to just run situations because, like your dream, like our fear is being unprepared for the situation. So do men naturally, like we do that? When I was a kid, I played toy swords and toy guns in my backyard. I would run through situations. As an adult, sadly, I still do that. We sit down, I'm looking at the door. I'm wondering, how many seconds is it going to take for whoever comes in? And then how long do I have to respond? Like all sorts of stuff. And it's not out of like fear. It's not out of concern or worry. It's just your brain.
Dude, I'm always looking
ticking.
for something to throw.
Well,
that's my initial thought is just, what can I throw at
Matt's
someone?
just throwing down.
No, it's distraction.
Matt's worst fear is he's going to be stuck in a ball pit when it happens, and it's just those plastic hollow balls.
There you go. That's
so he's going to have an
dream.
abundance of things to throw. No shortage of ammunition. But
like,
each one is just...
I'm dead serious. I think about like literally, like my immediate thought is, what is near me that I can just huck in someone's direction?
That's funny.
Like, come on, like at least it's something. Like if I'm going out throwing my mug at someone's head. Okay,
Sure.
like how did Matt die? Well, he threw his mug,
There's this mug
or he
one
was
time.
riddled with bullets. Went out fighting with his mug. There you go. But yeah. Hey,
Think we
fellas,
digress, yeah.
any final thoughts on this? I feel like this is definitely gonna be something we're gonna revisit down the line.
Yeah.
But I definitely, this idea again of like, how are we meant to function? And what can we do in life to pursue that function? I love that word pursue. I love the fact that we've kind of been slowly eating away at our own definition or our touchstone, right? And I love the fact that if I go back to our first episode,
Yeah.
Mike was really tentative about like, I don't want to call this a definition. I'm thinking like, well, let's just call it that. We can change it. But like definitions are defined. They don't they're
Words
solid
have meaning.
and they have meaning
I will
and
harp
power.
on that.
And the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, oh, dude, we're missing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really, and I think that's the best part
Yeah.
about this. I think we want to reiterate this every time we come on here. We don't have all the answers. I think almost every guy out there has some of the answer. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, and I think some of us excel in certain areas and fail in others.
Yeah.
And trying to realize where we're failing to try to improve, I think is the best piece of advice I can give anyone out there and myself. But any final thoughts?
My final thought on this is, just it brings back into focus. I was kind of noodling on this about 3 weeks ago. Yeah. How big of this is a big topic, like I think coming into this, I was like, oh, we can really get this like fleshed out. We can really like define this. We can, and as we're going through this, I'm like, oh my God, this is not even an elephant. It's like a blue whale. Like it is so big. And it, like my mind, we say masculinity, but then like, what do we mean?
I know.
And so my final thoughts, I guess, are this is going to take so much time, and I love it. I love that this is what we're pursuing, and I'm going to have to be patient. I'm not good at being patient. I would love to have the answers
Have all
now.
the answers.
Yeah. And so but I appreciate like you and Mike and you guys, joining us on this journey as we are, working through this for ourselves. Right. And hopefully like you guys get the benefit of it too.
Yeah.
So
Mike, any final thoughts real quick? Nope. I think one of the things is too, if you guys have something to add to the conversation, definitely leave a comment and add to it. We would love to hear if you feel like we're missing something. What are we missing?
Yep.
Because the idea here is that we are in the pursuit of what is the truth of masculinity. That's what we're doing. We're pursuing it. Doesn't mean we're ever going to reach it. We could do this thing for 5-10 years and never reach it. But the idea is that pursuit, and I think that's a massive part of masculinity is that pursuit of those good things. Sure. So anyways, we appreciate you guys joining us. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you got something out of it. And we'll see you next time on the next podcast. You guys have a good one.
journey well, guys.
When this silent, you'll be alone, far from friends in life. You'll spend your evenings getting stoned to numb the ache inside.